Good evening. You're listening live to Kicking It. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you from the Indian Hill Studios in the Pine Hills Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida. I've got with me a very special guest tonight. It's Michelle Yeoh. No, it's not really, although I wish it was, because tonight's movie is Royal Warriors from 1986, starring Michelle Yeoh. I have RDV on the set phone wanting to discuss this film. Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great.
So, we're kind of stuck in the 80s because tonight is Tuesday, and of course, after the stream, we'll be doing our top 10 1982 films for Top 10 Tuesdays as we're revisiting the 1980s decade. So you and I have been trying to watch martial arts films from the 80s that aren't necessarily American films to kind of compare and contrast to some of the other films that we've gone over. Of course, we've done JCVD, Steven Seagal, we've done a whole bunch of them. And now we're kind of, going, well, Chuck Norris might be the staple of American films, but what about overseas? And one of the themes we've been talking about when it comes to Asian cinema is the fact that in the 80s you had these kind of girls with guns type of theme to it. Not the Tommy Shaw album from 1984 when he got all coked out, left sticks, but the fact that you had women kicking ass. And recently we had a Cynthia Rothrock special there too from Police Assassins 2 from 1985. So this one is 1986, the next year for Michelle Yeoh. And so for me, Doctor, my initial thoughts about this is what I would call an 80s film. There is some incredible stunts in here, some fantastic scenes. And to me, when I'm watching this, I'm looking at it going, wow, I really appreciated some of the stuff that they were trying to do and did do. Fortunately, there's a few annoying things in here that just kind of threw me off, like the significant others in here are really annoying. It's like, shut up, get off my screen. The print I saw, it was dubbed, but it has this soundtrack to it with a lot of tinny piano music to it, which I'll talk a little bit more about once we dive deep into it. But overall, I guess sit there and say, whenever I started feeling a little disappointed in the film or felt like it was getting slower, there's a character I didn't like, thank God they were smart enough to cut to some intense action. Not a lot of necessarily goofy stuff in here. More drama based in it than rather some goofy stuff in other films we've seen recently. So for you, what was your initial thoughts about this film?
Well, I didn't know what to make of it first because it starts off with her basically going onto a plane, like 20 minutes in there, they're like basically like thwarting a hijacking on a plane.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy, and then that's where they all meet together. She's on there, and like these guys like, oh, and I love it because she's like she's supposed to be the smarter, more sophisticated one, doesn't lead on, and here comes this guy. Hey, don't worry, I'm the U.S. Air Marshal. I'll protect you, little lady. I'm thinking, like, are you a freaking idiot? You're an air marshal and you're going to tell people? What if she's a terrorist? You don't know that. Because he just wants to get laid. And she kind of like, it's like, okay, kind of plays out. She's like, oh, great. And then she almost looks like she's relieved when those guys come in because they got the cops, two cops that they're escorting a prisoner. And also when the terrorists come on, she almost feels relieved because it's like, oh, great. It's like, I don't have to deal with this guy. I can go take care of that,
He does have a little bit of a skeevy vibe to him, doesn't he? I mean, he's not a good-looking dude, but he's kind of creepy.
He came across as a virgin who's never talked to a woman. That's what he came across as. I was like, this is really forced. And I'm thinking, like, I feel bad for her. And now I understand why some girls just don't like talking to guys.
He was a creeper.
But yeah, the fight scene here, there's the guy, and then we find out that another guy in there who's with that she's sitting across from. We usually argue with the guy because she's in the seat. It turns out she's in the seat across from him. He's a cop, and then he's with his wife and his kid. So when this happens and all this stuff, like all three of them pretty much, basically take out the bad guys. And there's one of these bad guys. They're fighting, and what happens is the gunshot goes off. The gun goes off, and it punctures a hole through the window. And you see how he's getting sucked out. His arms are there, and they're fighting. And then he's like, help me. And she pulls him back, and then he starts pushing her. But I love how she basically like threw him and shoved his head through the window. And you just see, and after a while, he just regains pressure in the plane. Yeah. His head just freezes solid. I was like, lift my butt up. But like, not only that, there's another guy with a grenade. It's like, what?
Oh yeah.
My only complaint was that is like, the guy took the grenade, put it inside like a cabinet, like a wooden cabinet on a plane. He's like, You'll be fine. Don't worry. With the soup and all stuff, it explodes and like the plane doesn't die or explode into crash. I was like, what?
Yeah, it's a little over the top. Again, it's an 80s film. So,
But what do I know? Maybe they have second rate or third rate grenades. Maybe they don't make it big and bang as ours does. I don't know.
well, I got to tell you, the thing about it too is it starts off, and one of the things we talked about with Asian cinema that was pretty great was that, and not just films with Sammo Hung involved in them, but other directors, they really took, instead of period pieces, tried making a more mainstream what was going on at the time in the 80s. So you see a lot of street scenes in like Hong Kong or Macau or wherever they're filming, and in here you get that it looks like it's a legit plane, or at least the way they built it out. It's one of these beautiful double-decker ones, and it brings back the hints of what flying used to be when it was exotic, sexy. You could smoke on a plane. Nobody was a jerk off. The stewardesses were really nice and hot. It was a luxury. It felt like to fly back then. Of course, it's not that way now. And so, to your point, when the movie starts, you see her and she's undercover at this festival or whatever, like where these two dudes are like chasing this guy down with the sword. She kicks their ass, and there's some really good scenes there. And it's like, okay, that's a nice opening gambit. And then here, when they're on the plane, to your point, there's some fantastic, even if it's a little brainless as far as the reality of what would happen, there's some great shots to it. So it does get set up that, she's, of course, is, an ass kicker. She's the Chuck Norris of, this film. And it's unfortunate because this film I felt like could have been A++ instead of, just really good, because her boyfriend comes across as a total D-bag. And then, of course, the little girl with the husband that ends up being the undercover cop that you mentioned, they have this child. And, of course, they don't meet because they go through this experience. They're having like a double date, having dinner. And the wife is just sitting there like, why do you have to do what you're doing? We have a child. You need to come home. But of course, she's saying that with her eyes. And he's, of course, saying, okay, baby, I've got a job. I can't wait to go back home. And
it was
you're
so
going to
awkward.
an office job 9 to 5. And she's just sitting there. And I'm like, just break up already. Take Michelle and some lines of coke into the bathroom and have a party. And I guess in Japan, you don't have to pay alimony or anything for your kids' child support, because it's like, this is just so horrible the way these people are. It is so juvenile. And again, they're not trying to be funny. They're trying to show that there's some distress among the two couples with their SOs. And it's like, thankfully, the film pretty much almost kills them off or really, really injures them. I mean, seriously, it was so annoying. It distracted from the movie.
I felt kind of bad about the fact that I was so happy when the car blew up. I was like,
I agree with you. And this is a horrible thing to say, because you're right. Because he can't just fly to Hong Kong the next day with his wife and child. He's kind of forced to finish off the task at hand. And he has to go with the pretty Miss Malaysia, Michelle Yeoh, next morning. And the wife just kind of doesn't look at him. And the wife's not ugly. She's not like grating on his nerves or whatever like that. She's not being dismissive. She has those sad punch me in the face eyes, because I'm trying to give you the guilt treatment. And I'm like, I'm not buying it, and neither is he. He's duty bound. He seems like a good guy. He's not going, oh my god, I can't wait to sleep with Michelle Yeoh. He's actually goes and meets with all that, and he says to his wife, okay, I'll meet you later, like that. And this is what makes it an 80s film. Not just the fact that Michelle Yeoh, as beautiful as she is, has a boy's haircut and outfit. Not because there's this really, I don't know which is wimpier, the keyboard parts of some of this movie or the piano, but there's a scene where they're outside this building and they're saying goodbyes to each other. And of course, the wife's in the car with the kid, and they say bye, and he gets ready to whatever. And then there's that crash zoom to underneath the car, because in 80s car movies or films that have cars in them blowing up, it's always the exact same thing. It's one singular red light underneath the car that you zoom in, and then he goes, and the thing blows up.
I have one of those fake security monitors. You can have cameras put up, and it blinks red on and off. I was like, it's so fake. It's like the real ones stay on. When I bought it, I was like, what is this crap? I got bamboozled, well, for $20 we expect to put up a fake one, but I was like, when I saw the little bomb in there, he's like, wait, what gifts does she have? It's like,
well, and then it's like, she gets in a fight with her boyfriend or whatever like that, because the boyfriend, even though he's a D-bag, he's kind of right. He says, hey, why are you being so nice to him? And she could say something like, obvious to a guy that's factual, who might buy, like, well, his wife and child just blew up, so, I feel like I should be nice to him. He is helping out on this case. But instead she's like, what are you talking about? Why are you so immature? And he gets all pissy about it. I'm like, dude, you don't need her, even though it's Michelle. Just go leave. You're a handsome dude, okay? And you are being kind of. Was the dude who lost his wife? He was being kind of a creeper on the plane. It was a stressful situation. We'll give him one. But this guy here, I'm like, dude, you are acting like you're 12 years old, acting like you're screwing, the 16-year-old cheerleader on the team. It just wasn't working. And like I say, thankfully, there's enough scenes in here broken up with action. And then one scene in particular, I had an issue with. It's kind of cool when you go into the Hong Kong underground and you go into one of their bars and it's shot on location somewhere, even if it's a nice set piece. It gives you the feel of the place, right? So you get the music playing and there's a bunch of smoke and stuff like that and drinking and going on. There's going to be this big shootout. You and I have talked about, Doctor, that at least with Chuck Norris movies, the earlier ones tried to shy away from guns. And here, there's definitely gunplay in it. I wish it wasn't in the movie because the action sequences and the fighting, especially the close-up one-on-one shots, they're so good. I mean, we got a lot of hard-hitting action in Police Assassins 2, but in here, they seem to be longer and more fluid. You know what I mean?
What's great about this is the fact you're watching Hong Kong. It's not Hollywood. Hollywood's like slow down the action, and we don't. And that's why I was so glad when Jackie Chan went back to like. Left Hollywood like the Hong Kong, because they're like, we want you to stop chewing gum and we want you to slow down the action so people can see it. It's like, no, because the way they do it is it's realistic. They actually are doing the stuff. It's not sped up. Hollywood speeds everything up because that's how talentless they have for people.
Well, you bring a good point too, because in here, again, I'm trying to compare this to the 80s themes out there. Not only you have some of the 80s themes like the way they dress, some of the guns getting mixed in with martial arts, but at least it's modern times. The soundtrack, if you want to call it that, let's just say score, sounds like a very 80s type film. Here in a bar around here, you get some scene where they're pulling guns on each other, and it's supposed to be this tense, dramatic kind of scene, and the guy's like, oh, go ahead, make my day. And I'm like, he really did just say that. What? And it just like took the wind out of my sail. I'm like, this is stupid. It's like, you got to be kidding me. And it's just, but again, I can't be mad because early on it's established that the bad guys wear suits, because there's always the pecking order of bad guys. There's the low-level grunts that have bad teeth and they stink and they look like that. Then there's the level up where they stink, they look bad, they don't brush their teeth, but they're jacked. Then there's the level 3 ones, which just look like ordinary guys, and they're your snitches. Then there's like level 4, which I was starting to pop a little bit because a bunch of the bad guys are wearing suits, which I absolutely love, because the higher up you go, the better looking you need to be, the more articulate you need to be, and certainly the smarter and or ass kicker you need to be. And in here, I started honestly rooting for the main bad dude, because not only was he an ass kicker, he's got the brick cell phone. He kidnaps her boyfriend. He hangs the boyfriend up in this place or like that, makes her come and look for him, and it's just really friggin' kind of cool. This guy's like popping for himself. And then the one scene that's just spectacular is he's got, and this to me is the best scene in the film. They're on top of a building. He had shot the guy in the parking lot when he was running away in his calf, and you get this nice little calf explosion, right? Mm-hmm. So he calls up on the really, really old school 80s brick cell phone that you would see like in Miami Vice, and he's basically telling her, hey, you need to come up here, I'm going to kill him. And so blah, blah, blah. She's looking up from the payphone up at the top of the building where he's at, and he's got the gun on the guy, and there's some really good camera shots of the camera like zooming, like falling down. I'm like, man, that's really good. This is cinema. And then he's like, oh, when she comes up, it's going to be bang, bang, bang. He die anyway. Ha, ha, ha. But he kind of hog ties him on a leg and kind of makes him kind of slip and fall over. So he's hanging there. She goes to run up. Well, for some reason, the idiot guy basically doesn't want to do it. And I guess he doesn't realize what's going on because he's got this blown out leg, and he unties himself. And he says, I love you. And he's falling all the way to the ground. And you see this guy falling from the high rise about 5 feet away from the building all the way down in super slow-mo. It's fantastic. It is an awesome scene. It's worth the price of the admission for the ticket anyway. And of course, that sets up for the final kind of shootout fight scene or whatever. But Doctor, I gotta say, you've pointed out the fact that you like a lot of these kind of action sequences better than some of the United States films.
Well, to me, these, you said there's more fast paced. They're actually doing, a lot of people are actually doing their stunts. It's more adrenaline. Like I said, this is like basically what you'd want to play in a video game. It's like you want to be the kung fu master. Like you're taking on waves and waves of bad guys, and then of course, there's always the one bad guy who can master your skill. And I like about this, it actually is somewhat believable as far as like, her. She's not just some super badass thing where she takes punches. She does.
She does take a beating. She's not immune. Absolutely.
And that's what I love about this. It actually looks more realistic. And that's all I can say is like, it's 80s, man. It's you got hot babes, you got cars exploding, you got a high speed chase. You got people shooting guns. You got, there's the bad guy with the, with the evil red bandana. He's like, ha ha ha. It's like, I got you at gunpoint now. And just like, it's just the comedy in there. It's the only thing it's missing is Jackie Chan.
Yeah.
But I'm not really sad that Jackie Chan's out of this, because I've seen Michelle Yeoh and Jackie Chan team up in Super Cop. So.
Well, I think in here, when you talked about her getting hit a lot, she does. The thing I liked about her in this film is that compared to what we saw there, where she had her own time, but also split time with Cynthia in the last movie we did, was that here with Michelle pretty much almost basically being a solo vehicle, is you see a lot more of her displaying her ability to move around, and you get a lot of it, and it's very fluid and it's very creative. Whereas Cynthia's, I think, is definitely a very Americanized kind of style, the way they shot it, very powerful, very strong kind of style. Michelle's in here is very fluid. You get the opening scene I talked about where she's chasing down two dudes that have like these swords because it's like an Asian festival, and she ends up like with a wooden one, and you get to see her do some stuff, and you're like, wow, she looks really fluid, really limber. She's just not a pretty face. She's got the goods when it comes to delivering it. And then here, like I said, unfortunately, I think there's a little bit of guns mixed into stuff, and I'm certainly not anti-gun in the film, but martial arts, that's what I want.
Mm-hmm.
The final scene basically is where she goes to the bad dude's little shack or whatever, and he's got on this, it looks like an old construction site, and he's got the tomb of, I should say, the grave of her boyfriend or whatever like that on hung up on everything on the crane. And it's like, okay, that's kind of stupid, but it's a little over the top. But, the dude who lost his wife's, driving in or whatever, and the guy's taking shots at him, cell phone brick guy, and then they get in there and they each have their separate moments fighting or whatever. But then there's a scene also in this fight that I thought they could have milked it honestly a little bit better, but they're fighting. And
I mean, the scene where the stupid guy, the lover boy, is hanging by his
that scene is phenomenal. But the very end of the movie here, literally like the last 2 or 3 minutes, where they're the end fight, there's a scene where Michelle's fighting a cell phone brick guy, and basically like this, fence door kind of falls on her, and he's trying to bash through it. She moves around and trips him and stuff. And then they kind of resolve from that and get up to their feet, and they're facing each other, and there's some strikes. But the guy that puts this move on her, and he kind of rotates. And this is where the film was really good, showing these scenes. He kind of turns and he slams her into a pole, and you just kind of see her bend around it and rotate and slam to the ground. I'm like, oh shit, I wasn't expecting that. I was like, ooh, that's good. And it resolves kind of the way you expect it to there at the end, with them kind of winning. But, the guy who lost his wife ends up kind of surviving. And he wasn't bad, and his martial arts are very good in here, too. There's an extended chase scene that he has. You like
that chase scene after his wife and daughter are killed, how he takes the car, and they're just the high speed. I was like, holy crap, this is awesome. But I'm thinking, like, this is like basically like I could see them like going in Callahan, give me your badge and gun. You destroyed half the town.
Well, see, that's another 80s thing too. Like I said, that's Miami Vice, because it's it's almost, and he would sit there in Miami Vice with his hands on his hips, and he'd be like, Crockett, Tubbs, you're off the case. And then, Croc and Tubbs would say something where they go out on their own, drive around at night on wet roads, listening to usually Phil Collins or some other music. And then boom, you'd have your music video and at the end shoot out. And by this time, you have no idea what the hell's going on in the Miami Vice episode, except for they get the bad guy and they usually have something weird said at the end and then they're done. This movie relied heavily on taking crap from 80s TV.
There's a lot of tropes like that. Like, the guy, the cop, is like, "You're off the case." So it's like, well, then if I'm not the case, here's my gun, my badge. I'll do it my way. And that's what Yes Man was. Remember, they handed in their badge and their guns.
Yep.
Same thing. So basically, I'm looking at Michelle Yeoh's stuff. After this, LK was asking if we have seen the heroic trio films. Wow, tongue twister.
No, I have to rewatch them. I believe I've seen them, but it's been forever. That's why we're kind of revisiting these.
Apparently, she's in. I'm looking at her IMDb. She's in there listed as Chung, the Invisible Woman, and then number 3. So I don't know what's all that about. But I mean, from when I looked at it a little bit, it looks pretty cool. I kind of want to watch Super Cop next. But the problem is that Super Cop apparently is the 3rd movie with Jackie Chan, if I'm looking at correctly. Police Story 3.
Well, we're not going hard and fast in necessarily in particular order, but it's one of those things where, and it's just to be said, even though it's there in the chat too with everybody, is that, your source of films versus mine and versus, whatever service you have, they might be called something different. The year might be off by one or so here.
No, Super Cop was the American version of Police Story 3, pretty much.
Right. But I'm just saying that's one of those things where, I'm trying to sell that, but I'm not trying to write all 3, 4, 5 titles, of what the film is too. So yeah. And of course I'd never thought of it, but I wonder if there's like an Asian wiki as opposed to say the American one with what we look at. So if they're over there, would they see it a little differently? I don't know.
They have their own little Asian wikis. There's also Asian IMDb and stuff there too. They have their own stuff. Hong Kong has their own database stuff. You'll find sites if you dig deep enough, you'll go into like a whole new world, as England team would say.
Yeah, no, this film overall, I will say, Doctor, I enjoyed it. I was surprised at the intensity of some of the action because I was wondering how goofy they were going to be, and honestly, they're not that goofy, which I kind of liked. We had talked about in the last movie how we called them the Three Stooges were being kind of goofy, and here it's not, but you definitely get a lot of different things in here. You get your high-speed chase, you get stuff on a plane, you get stuff in the club, you get stuff at the construction site, you get something driving around. So it gives you everything that you want. I think it's a very exciting film. The only thing bad are the SOs, but fortunately they kind of get rid of them, and I don't feel guilty saying that for the most part. So I certainly don't mind if that's something you catch on Prime or wherever you watch your stuff. It's definitely worth a watch too. So my only concern is next time we go to watch another martial arts film, especially if it's one of these overseas ones, I'm going to try to make the effort to find a better quality print because I thought this film looked really good, and I appreciate that. It didn't look too dated to me. But I'm going to give you the last word on what you think about this film and Michelle Yeoh in general.
Well, and Michelle Yeoh, she's the real deal as far as I come with that. I think she started off as a model, and then they eventually, either her or Cynthia Khan. I just get those two mixed up with their backgrounds, but Michelle Yeoh is still kicking butt today. Her career, like a lot of these people, like even though they might not big huge American Hollywood stars over here, like kind of like Lucy Liu was like blew up in the 90s here, Jackie Chan blew up in the 90s, but when these people are in like Hong Kong or they normally film, a lot of times their movies are better than what we get over here. And that's what I've been finding a lot. I mean, I'm willing to watch it in the Cantonese language just to see these movies because I'm like, holy crap, the action scenes of martial arts. It's not like we're getting like the horrible American Double Dragon movie.
Well, the thing too is I know you're kind of half joking about it and half not, but as we said before with the 80s films, each of them had their own kind of style too. And we talked about the Chuck Norris films with a template until he went all guns. Basically, we talked about Steven Seagal, and regardless of like we say about him, his films are unique. Perfect Weapons, a very good movie to me. JCVD. I mean, we could go on about different people and their different styles and what you saw, but also at the same time, it's not just in America. I mean, you have this explosion everywhere, and I like the fact that you just don't have the period pieces like the old Harvest films and whatnot. You've got here something that looks modern, and even though it's set in Hong Kong, Macau, nothing wrong with that. The stuff's really great. The stunts are spectacular. And you know what? I almost appreciate him a little bit more now being older compared to all the green screen stuff that's going on. So for us to kind of go back and watch some of these martial arts films of the 80s that are not American, I think it's been a real treat.
I can understand why some people don't like Seagal or what's his name? Van Damme. Van Damme, he's the pretty boy. Seagal, I'm the bad guy. I'm the it's like he's like a whenever I see Seagal, he's like, I'm always the hardest nail his cock. It's like, and then you got like, Jean-Claude Van Damme, I'm a pretty boy. It's like, and then you see Jackie Chan, he's like, I don't want to die. And then you see Michelle Yeoh, I'm just gonna kick ass. It's like depending on who you watch, it's just like they have their own specific style. So I agree with that with the way they do things. It's like, but like I said, like Donnie Yen, I noticed he does a lot of time period stuff, like especially with Ip Master, or Ip Man, whatever it's called.
Mm-hmm. Ip Man.
Yeah, so it all depends on what you want to watch. You want to watch like hot babes just beating the crap out of guys and then having sometimes like hokey villains, or you want to watch a guy who's like, hey, I'm gonna show up my butt and do the splits every move I do. It's like it's your choice. I mean, ladies love Jean-Claude Van Damme.
He's a handsome man. He's very pretty, and more pretty than handsome to me.
Well, I think it's more the accent, the fact that he's looking shape. He's
a good looking man. Well, yeah, and that's the thing too is that for me, I mean, I don't care what you look like. If you kick ass, that's great. If you look great and kick ass, that's great. Sometimes that can be held against you. I think, especially if you're a woman. That's one of the definite things about this film here too. Is you go, okay, Michelle Yeoh might be a pretty face, but if she's an ass kicker too, that's great. And I certainly, appreciated that the more that I've seen of her, because for a lot of Americans, they really didn't know too much about her until she was, I think, Tomorrow Never Dies, with the James Bond film. And I thought, okay, why? I don't get it. An American audience, I think, was whatever. Of course, it's not an American film. It's British, of course, but, it's different strokes for different folks. And I thought that really toned down what she was capable of doing at that point in her career, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But seeing some of this earlier stuff of hers is just dynamite. And again, being an 80s film, who cares? It doesn't have to be a detailed plot. You don't have to have a lot of depth to it. It doesn't have to be 100% complete throwaway, but if you just set the scene enough and you give the characters just enough of a personality where you don't really hate them and you actually like them, you don't have to get 100% emotionally invested in them, but you get what's going on and then you root for them. And that's the secret of Chuck Norris making a Chuck Norris film the way we've come to know him, especially the early ones. And right now we've seen it for 2 films in a row with Michelle Yeoh. So overall, I would say it's a complete success. All right, guys, that's it for us for tonight. Doctor, I'd like to thank you for jumping on this one. I know this is a last-minute thing that we were wanting to do, but I'm glad we watched it tonight, ladies and gentlemen, roughly 8 o'clock here Eastern in about 20, 30 minutes. And the team from My Life Comics will be joining us. We'll be doing the Top 10 Tuesday 1982 films where we're going to be reviewing those. So I'd like to thank you all for listening. Thank you for sharing. And, of course, thank you for subscribing and getting the word out about us, too. So for Doctor, from myself, and the team, everybody here at the Xtreme Movie Show, have a good night. And, of course, stay extreme.
See you again when we get to 800.